Someday, we may realize that we have less time than we think. When we're little, when we're growing up, we like to think that we have all the time in the world and we have all the time that we need to experience everything we want to experience. But it seems to be that around the time that you start forming memories, then that's when you become conscious of other people dying. And you're like, will I die? You ask your parents that, you ask your friends or whoever, and yeah, they tell you that you're going to die someday. And you're like, well, what happens after that? And, well, the truth is, we don't know. Um, we're animals, just like the rest. We all die. We're all bound to the same physical plane. And we seem to think that we are above other animals and we're above nature. But in reality, we're not. The thing is that through evolution, we have evolved intelligence stronger than what we need to survive. That gives us a lot of thinking room, a lot of capacity to think about what our meaning of life is, because a cow in a field or a wild animal isn't thinking about that. They're thinking about, like, how do I survive? You know, what do I need to do to survive? But we have all these houses and technology, and we're so safe that we just sit around and think, what is the meaning of all of this? Some people think that we were here put by a divine being, and that our purpose is that we're here created in their image and to live like under their ruling. And that very well could be true. You can't disprove it, but you can't prove it either. So it's just as likely as basically any other theory about why we're here. But we like to come up with stories about what we don't understand, because we're pattern seeking creatures. We always need to find what is happening. We need to understand something. It doesn't sit right with us when we don't understand something. So we come up with the most likely, or just a story about what we think it is. And that explains a lot of religion. And religion is good for calmness and clarity and finding a good purpose in your life. And it is one way of coping with that we know that we're going to die someday. We don't have as much time as we think we do. There's this other school of thought that was proposed by a philosopher named Albert Camus, and he proposed that the meaning of life is absurd, and that we're not meant to know what the meaning of life is, because we simply can't. We are smart enough to know how to survive, but the meaning of life and the meaning of all the universe and how it became and why we're going to die and what happens after is something that us, bound to our physical forms, bound to the cold and different universe, we can't figure it out. And we're not meant to, really. So he's saying that you shouldn't let this realization that you don't have a lot of time get to you. You should live your life and not dwell on the fact that it's going to end someday. You should enjoy what you have left. And that is reflected a lot by Randy Pausch. He enjoyed the time he had left with his family. He enjoyed all of the moments that he had with his kids and his wife and with himself. He wouldn't dwell on stupid things like the afterlife or what happens after he dies. He just wanted to focus on what he could control. And he knew that the true meaning of everything was absurd, just like Camus. So, not everybody's a wise philosopher or a religious person. A lot of people think, what does Albert Camus know? And I think religion isn't true. I think it's BS. I think it's just a story. Well, a lot of those people are teenagers or young adults that just aren't really well-footed in the experience of life and what to think about it. They tend to not really cope well with it. They tend to think about it a lot. The thought of possibly just snapping out of existence someday is overwhelming. It is just too much to handle, and I can relate. I've had experiences where I'm just like, what is going to happen to me? And I still find myself thinking like that sometimes. You really can't help it when you're faced with such a daunting reality that you're going to be dead someday. And it's just unavoidable. Everybody has to do it. Everybody has to die. It's a very sad reality, but it's true. Some cling to what they can control. They control things in their lives. And that's good, because then you're like Randy Pausch. You can only control a certain amount of things, but some people just spend their whole lives worrying about what they can do, about their death, which is truly nothing. So it's just a negative feedback loop. There are people who aren't completely nihilistic out there, but they also don't worship anything, and that's what I'm getting at. And some believe that you do live on after death, in the life of another creature, that life just continues on afterwards, because all we know is life. We can't know death, because, the whole basis of our existence is life. We can't know death by any capacity, because you can't really talk about death after you've died. Anybody who has was probably hallucinating, because they had a near-death experience and they got brought back to life in a hospital. That's the most likely comparison. So we cope by either accepting the fact that we don't know and finding another solution to our longing for meaning and understanding, such as just accepting the reality that it's absurd. Or we can cope by just coming up with an explanation that could be true because you can't disprove it, which is probably not as stable. I like to stand on the middle ground. I can admit that the thought of there being no afterlife is terrifying to me, which is why I don't choose to be nihilistic. I would believe in a religion only if there was solid proof that there is something or some creator beyond the indifferent cosmos and the incomprehensible reality of existence. However, I'm a living example of what Abraham Maslow once said, is that people repress the magnitude of existence. They don't take in that everything is happening. Actually, we can't comprehend that life is so improbable, but it happened to us. We can't comprehend where our consciousness came from. I'm completely overwhelmed, as Maslow would say a person is. And it's so the person can live their day-to-day life without having an existential crisis daily, which sometimes I do. Some choose the middle ground out of a position of optimism. Those who simply can't just prove that there is anything more, but they have hope. Like the religious man, that there might be something. And some people think out of pessimism, who, like the optimist, can't prove that there is anything more, but it goes a layer deeper. The unease of death outweighs the blind hope of something more. They simply don't have the willpower to face the absurdity of reality and or accept nihilism for its cold surrender into nothingness, and they find themselves lost because they don't know what to believe. I would consider myself to align with the former. I am very aware of my shortcomings, but what can I do? All I can do is live on to the next day and hold out hope for continuation of consciousness. And that's why I say I line up with an optimist. I'm not completely like Randy Pausch because I can't accept that there would be nothing. So that is how I think when I think that I don't have as much time as I think I do. I think that you should maximize what you can do in your life, and you should only do what you can control. I'm not completely comfortable in it, but I believe that that'll go away with time and life experience, and I'll learn to accept the true reality of being a living creature. And someday, and I can only hold out hope, that I won't be so lost in the future, and I can really accept it like Randy Pausch and Albert Camus.